Bienvenue, benvenuti, and welcome to Expatriotical, the podcast for expats, travelers, and other adventurous souls. I'm Chandra Ali, and after living as an expat with my husband and 4 children in 2 different countries for 6 years, I've learned the arts of pivoting during pitfalls, traveling tastefully for less, and soaking in amazing new cultures without losing your own. Join me as we dive into the joys and challenges of travel and the expat life in every episode. Hello from Paris, everyone. I'm super happy to announce that the sun is shining today, and it has been for several days in a row. And there are even rumors in my weather app that the temperature is going to go up and it might feel like spring by Friday. So there's lots to be excited about, including the fact that my kids just went back to school this week after almost 2 weeks off due to the vacances d'hiver, or winter vacation that happens every year here in France. As I mentioned last week, we have the second of our TOEs, or types of expats, interviews today. But before I introduce you to this inspiring young lady, I wanted to give a little bit of a background, especially if this is your first time listening to the podcast. My guest today is going to be talking about living as a non-governmental organization, or NGO expat, as well as a missionary expat. And when she talks about her missionary work, she is talking about it from the perspective of being a Christian. I am also a Christian, and I do sometimes talk about my faith or about God and how important He is in my life. But this podcast is not objectively Christian, but I'm also not going to edit out that part of my life or my personality. So if you are not of the Christian faith, whether you are of another faith or don't have a particular faith tradition at all, I hope that you can listen to this episode objectively and with an open mind, knowing that I share this with you not to proselytize you, but to let you in on a world that most of us as expats are not experiencing. I personally learned a lot about the types of mission work and NGO work that are out there, though I know that my guest's experience does not even encompass it all. I also wanted to explain 2 other things. 1, there are going to be some sound glitches, and that is because I was noticing on this Zoom call that when I would speak, if it overlapped with my guest's speech, it created a bit of a glitch for a second in her audio. So I want to apologize for that. The second thing is when let's just say her name now. Her name is Brooke. When Brooke references the nations, that comes from a scripture in the Bible, Matthew 28:19, when Jesus says to go and make disciples of all nations, which basically means to go and share the gospel, which the word gospel means good news, about Jesus with the whole world. So when she's talking about the nation, she basically means the whole entire world. I'm sure many of you knew that, but in case you didn't, I just wanted to share what she meant by that. Okay, so without further ado, here is the second of our types of expats interviews with the lovely and eternally effervescent Brooke Anderson. Well, everybody, today I have the second of my TOEs, which stands for Types of Expats interviews. And today with me is a wonderful, amazing, inspiring young lady. Her name is Brooke Anderson, and she is here to talk to us about 2, not 1, but 2 different types of expats, and that is the NGO, or the non-governmental organization expat, and then also the missionary. And so, first of all, Brooke, hello and thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be on here.
I'm so excited that you're here today. So we are going to jump into these 2 different types of lifestyles of being an expat. But first, can you kind of lay the ground for everybody listening of who you are and where you're from and what you're up to? I mean, obviously what you're up to, we'll get to that, but just basically where you come from in the world.
Yeah, so right now I'm sitting in my hometown in Texas, and I'm just home. I kind of bounce around all the time. Sometimes my home is in other countries, but right now it's here. So I grew up in Texas. I love Texas. I think it's an incredible place. my family lives here, so every time I'm home, I just come here. But I've bounced around a lot over the past few years, whether it be college or working with NGOs or missions and all this stuff. So right now, I know you said we'll get into it, but right now I am full-time doing missions with an organization called Overland Missions, and I'm just kind of in an in-between season with that. So I'm so excited to have the time to be able to be here with you guys and talk about this.
Okay. So you kind of mentioned like going between the NGOs and mission work and college. And so I I actually was curious for myself, like what attracted you to doing this type of work? You mentioned college. Maybe you can touch on like what you did there and then what just drew you from there to this work.
Yeah. So I don't even know what drew me to this work, honestly. I just remember always growing up and knowing I was going to be a missionary, knowing I was going to go into missions. When I graduated high school, I did a missions training school, and it was partly because my mom encouraged me to do it. I didn't even really want to do it. I wanted to go to college. But then she was like, no, you should look into it. And it was YWAM, if anybody's familiar. And I ended up loving it. I got there and I loved missions. I loved being a part of that world, and going to the nations and telling people about Jesus was just so much fun. And I was like, I can do this for the rest of my life. But then I came home and I was like, maybe I should just go to college and just do that thing. So I did go to college for a year. I finished a whole year. I got those basics out of the way. But while I was at college, I was like, this is so entirely miserable to just be at college and in the classroom and doing all that stuff, which to some people, it's perfect for them and it's what they love to do and they love
Mm-hmm.
school. But I just get a little bit bored sitting in a classroom. So after that, I felt especially clearance from the Lord to take a step out of college and go full time in missions. And that's been a whole journey in itself. But I'm finally, years later, I'm finally here doing missions full time. And it truly is such a dream come true.
That's awesome. Okay, I really love how that speaks to, I mean, college is great, but it's not for everybody. And it's also something you can go back to, as far as if you so choose. I did not go the 4 straight years and done. I was 25 when I graduated and had been to multiple colleges/universities. So it's a journey. It's a journey in and of itself.
Yeah.
So, okay, so what was your first experience stepping out as an NGO worker?
My first experience, I worked with an organization in the Middle East,
Okay.
and I got to work with them because their whole thing is they advocate for kids with sick hearts, mostly babies. So they work in hospitals, they work with fundraising. I got to fundraise for them, and then I also got to work in this country in the Middle East and spent a summer there. I was pretty much the mom to this little girl. We'll call her Wendy for the
Privacy
sake of
sake.
privacy. Yes.
Exactly.
I was her mom, and so it was a little bit abnormal to a typical NGO, or not a typical NGO, but the typical NGO work because I pretty much was just her primary caretaker,
Okay.
which was really fun. It was something that I've never really. I grew up nannying, I grew up babysitting. I didn't really expect to become a mom at 19, and so it was fun for the summer to just get to be with her and see what it was like a little bit behind the scenes of NGOs in the Middle East and what that was like.
That's really, really cool. And so just to put it out there, we met because of a second trip, right? To care for Wendy. And on your way back, you were going to be in Paris. And so a friend connected us and I talked to Chris because that's the thing, when you are a mom and you have like your kids and you're like, there's somebody that could like use a place to stay, but like that kind of thing. Like we've never met this person, but because of who you are and you just came with all these wonderful glowing reviews. So I was like, yeah, let's meet her and she can come stay with us. And I say this to say my children just fell in love with you. I mean, just absolutely. It was like they'd known you their whole lives. And people that know my kids know that yeah, they're generally friendly, but there's a couple one that can be kind of standoffish if that, I'm not going to even give the gender because that will give things away. But, if that person doesn't, think they have a good vibe or that kind of thing. And then there's another one that can be difficult even with well-beloved family members. Let's just put it that way. And so saying all that, I mean, they just lit up like Christmas trees around you and just
Oh,
absolutely loved you. So I can't imagine like how blessed, how lucky Wendy was to get to have you not just one time, but 2 times to come and care for her during that time. And so you went from, and can you kind of explain that you said a summer. So was it like a full 3 months, like 6 weeks? What was that first stint like for you?
Yeah, well, first of all, I love your kids so much. I think about them all the time and I miss them. I think they're
Thank
just so
you.
incredible. Um, but I was there for, it was supposed to be 3 months was the original plan. I ended up being there for 2 months just because of some things that were going on in my life back home. But yeah, 2 months in the Middle East is a good amount of time to really acclimate and get to know the
The
place,
culture. Yeah.
the culture, and just get a picture of it. And I loved it. I love the Middle East. I could spend the rest of my life there and love my life. So
Wow, that speaks volumes. That speaks a lot. And so you did that for 2 months, and then you came home.
mhm.
And then what was the next step? Was it another NGO? Was it short term mission work after that? What was your next adventure?
Yeah, so when I got back from the Middle East, I was home for a few months and then I ended up going back on that second trip
Okay.
to where I was working with them in Europe. And that's when I got to meet you. And so when I was in Europe, I was pretty much doing the same thing I did in the Middle East. I just got to be in Europe, which I wasn't expecting to be in Europe that spring or winter. And so that was honestly such a gift and really fun because I got to then go to Paris and meet you guys and do that. But yeah, so I did that and then came home again, just working, figuring out what my next step was. And then that leads me into what I'm doing now, which I'm working with Overland Missions, like I mentioned before. I was in Africa all last fall doing their training program, which is it helps equip you to go to the nations and be sustainable and do it well, but also it's an onboarding onto their staff. And so I ended up joining their staff and I am just so excited. Right now, I'm in the fundraising period, so that's what I get to do. My full-time job, I'm on staff with Overland, but my job title is fundraising right now. So that's what I'm doing is I'm just preparing to be launched into the nations, but in a good, sustainable way that's going to keep me there for a long time financially. Do you want me to explain what my job is going to be?
Yes. And then I actually have questions about the financial side, and I would like to see, like, relate that to the NGO as well. Like,
Yeah.
because I think not everybody realizes that a lot of missionaries, and I don't know about the NGO, that's why I was asking if you
Mhm.
can fill in that piece, but
Yeah.
they have to, as you said, fundraise. They basically go and they share, like, this is the mission that we're going to do, this is what we're going to be doing, and you're going to share that, of course. But I would love to know that side of it, that maybe we can just rewind to the NGO. And did you have to
Yeah.
do fundraising for that?
Yeah, so I did. That fundraising looked different than the fundraising now. So then all I did, because I kind of was a last minute add on to this Middle Eastern NGO. I decided to go like 2 weeks before I left. So for fundraising, it just looked like me posting on Instagram and being like, I need $5,000 to get me to this place in the Middle East and then to help me live there. So that's what I did. It was just like a one time asking people to give, and then they just gave to me. And I think I maybe asked a few times over the summer just for like to cover costs, but it pretty much covered me for the whole summer.
Okay. Okay. And
Yeah.
so then now moving into Overland, yeah, you can explain, like, you're doing the fundraising, and then what you're doing once you get there.
Yeah. So because this is now my full-time job, the NGO was not. It was just a short-term stint. And like I said, it was a summer. And so fundraising for that looked a lot different than going full-time long-term with an organization. So
Yeah.
this time I'm in a season called MPD, which means Ministry Partner Development. And basically I am just doing sitting down with people kind of like this and just explaining to them what my job is going to look like, what my vision is for the nations, what my goals are for the nations, and basically selling myself so that they will join my team and support me long term financially. So now instead of doing like one time gifts to add up to $6,000 or something to get me through the summer, I'm looking for partners to partner with me for hopefully a very long time to make my life easier and backing me with monthly gifts. So that way it'll be long term sustainable. I don't have to worry about finances. I can just put my head down and do what I need to do and do ministry that way.
And I just want to put it out there, like, to say, I mean, I believe, and you can please correct me if I'm wrong, but the way it's a nonprofit. Is that correct? So like if people
It is.
donate that way, then it's for American citizens. It's tax deductible. So it's like giving to
Yes.
any other 501c3, and yeah. But I also want to give the perspective because the people that listen to this are majority expats. That's like the purpose, obviously, for travel too. And I'm sure we're going to ask you to share some really great adventure stuff in a little bit. But as far as lifestyle, I just want everybody to kind of imagine like being this fundraising is so crucial because a lot of people come as expats, whether you're government sponsored, if you are a independently wealthy, that's not me, but or a company sponsored, and the financial side is by and large is taken care of.
Hmm.
Like you're given a stipend for like housing allowance, or if it's government, sometimes like they just rent stuff and they put you in what they want. And but for you, all this stuff, like it falls on you. Like you really, thus this support, the support and the financial fundraising time and period, so that you can go
Yeah.
in and, like you said, not be like trying to serve and help people get clean water, and also be thinking, how am I going to eat today? Like
Yeah.
so this is a really crucial part that I just wanted to put out there, that this is not just like you asking for money to live a cushy lifestyle. It's you
Right.
asking to be able to eat and have power where you're at.
Yes. Yes, it's very true. Yeah. And I think that's something that people don't really understand, like you said, when it comes to the missionary lifestyle. And also, there's a common misconception that missionaries need to be poor, which is not biblical. And because, I mean, God wants good things for his kids. And so that's kind of the mindset that I have going into fundraising is like, well, I'm because I'm a Christian and I'm a believer, and I believe that I'm doing the call of God on my life by going out to the nations based on the Great Commission. I actually have a right to receive good things because all good and perfect gifts come from the Lord. And so, coming in with that mindset, it does open up kind of a whole different world when it comes to fundraising because instead of feeling like I'm a beggar and begging
Mm.
for money, begging for food to eat, I'm like, no, this is actually part of the call of God on my life. And if I want to accomplish things well, then I need to eat. And I mean, it says in scripture that laborers deserve their wages. And so that's kind of changed my perspective on it because I did go in with like, oh my gosh, I have to beg for this, but I don't. And you're right, it makes it just so much easier for me to live my life if I know that I will have food at the end of the day or a paycheck next month or things like that. So it is different, but it's like necessary. I'm fundraising for my life and for my paycheck and my job and all this stuff. So it's interesting, but it's definitely different than a typical expat would experience.
And so I also want to put it out there for people that, giving is a part of their natural rhythm, whether they are like part of a church or not. If you could explain what you're going to be doing, because there's so many people that are like, I love to give. I may not be like a Christian or in the church, but like I love to give to a good cause. And so can you kind of explain like when you're out in the field, if that's the right terminology
Yeah,
nowadays, I don't
you're
really
right.
know. What are you going to be doing once you get out there?
Yes, so I have the privilege of having my dream job. And so Overland Missions, their whole thing is that they go to the people and the places that are the hardest to get to. So it doesn't matter how far or how off the beaten path it is, they're going to go and get there because people are worth it. And Jesus is worth it. And so my job is I'll be in America for now for 6 months out of the year, pretty much the school year. And I'll be seeking for revival in America. I'll be evangelizing, I'll be discipling, all that stuff. But my main role will be to recruit people. So I'll get to do recruiting events, go to churches, go to colleges, things like that, and just recruit people to come with me on the other 6 months out of the year where I will get to do short term trips, expeditions. There'll be like 2 to 6 week long trips where we'll just go to these remote places where the people are lost and we'll just go and preach the gospel to them. So it's pretty simple, but it's a lot of strategy, a lot of logistics, a lot of leading, and then teaching my recruits how to actually preach the gospel because a lot of them it's going to be their first time in the nations, actually like laying out the gospel for people in front of them. And so I'm so excited because I love America. I love the people here. I would love to see them actually understanding what it is that as a Christian nation we believe and who Jesus is. And then I love the nation so much. I love the people in the nations. I love cultures. I love traveling. I love seeing everything. And so it feels like such a gift that I get to pair my two favorite things together, and it's my job. It's my career.
And so when you the other 6 times, excuse me, the other 6 months of the year when you're out and you're abroad, really, you're living this expat life,
Yes.
then what, so obviously there's the spiritual aspect, and
Mhm.
what are the other things that you find that you're doing practically, like hands on the ground, feet on the ground, in serving the people that you're surrounded by?
Yeah. So Overland, they are not a humanitarian aid organization or an NGO, which is different than what I've ever worked with. So this
Okay.
is a different thing um, than I've experienced before. Their whole thing is we go and we preach the gospel and we do evangelism, which it's really cool getting to work with them last fall and then like comparing, not even comparing it, but just like looking at this versus my NGO work and my humanitarian aid work, it is just such a different work. But it's so beautiful, and also both are valid works. And so practically for me, it's going to be mostly just because of the state of my job.
Hmm.
I will get to just like be in a country for a few weeks, preach the gospel, see people come to know Jesus, and then I get to transfer them over to our missionaries who are on the boots on the ground all the time in those nations.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah,
get it.
so we
Okay.
work hand in hand with our missionaries who are on the ground all the time.
That are
And so
locally there. Okay.
yes, so we get to have them do the follow up and the follow through, and we just get to kind of do the groundwork, which is fun. It keeps everybody on their toes and working really beautifully together as the body of Christ. We do have other in Overland. We have other more humanitarian sustainable things. Like we do have our water projects and they work and they go repair wells in villages, which then gives them the opportunity to tell them about Jesus. We have a sustain program, and it basically is farming and teaching the people how to farm really well,
Nice.
because sometimes in places they just have farmed one way their whole lives and they don't understand that there's ways to keep the ground fertile and not rid the whole earth or their whole land of their nutrients. And so
Yeah.
we have our different projects that do more humanitarian aid work, but the main goal of this organization is to go and just evangelize.
Okay. So there's different hands and feet, if you will, of Overland
Yes.
missions. That's really cool.
Yes.
So, where do you think you're going to be going this first time around? Like once you are finished with your fundraising, and how are you feeling about it all?
Yeah, I honestly have no idea where I'm going to be going. I won't know that because my I have bosses, and so my bosses will assign me the places to go this whenever I'm close to being fully funded slash fully funded. And so I don't know. I have dreams. I would love to go to Southeast Asia, or I would love to go back to the Middle East and those places. But genuinely, they could send me anywhere, and I would be so happy. Just because there's so many places I've never been, and I would love to go to everywhere. So they could send me anywhere, and I would be happy. What was the last part of your question? I'm sorry.
How you're feeling about it? But I think I can tell. I
I
think you're
think I
excited.
answered that. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so now I want to hear some of, like, one or two that you can think of just the craziest adventures that obviously that you can share, because sometimes there's privacy issues, of, or just the most wild thing that you've seen living in the field and living as either as an NGO expat or as a missionary expat.
Mhm. Um, let's see. I think some of the craziest things that I would see on the daily basis is in cities, bigger third world cities, just how people travel. I always think it's so cool and interesting to see how people travel, but you'll be walking down the street and a motorcycle with a five-person family will run past you, and everybody's
Wow.
just kind of hanging on to anything they can hang on to. Kids are sitting everywhere, they're kind of squeezing, holding on. Um, and anytime I see that, I'm like, okay, I'm in places that I love to be because they're just these awesome third world places where people just do whatever they want, and it's incredible. So I think that's always a crazy thing to see when I'm in those places. And then I'm trying to think of a good story that I have. Um, can I tell like a missionary story or just a
Y-
travel story?
Sure. What I mean, all of the above. Go for it.
Yes. So when I was in Zanzibar last fall, and I don't know if anybody's ever heard of the Maasai tribe, but they're a really incredible tribe, and they are in mainland Tanzania. They're very much like they stick to their roots. They have their culture. When men are like 13 or 13 or 15, something like that, they have to kill a lion to prove their manhood.
Whoa.
Like they're that kind of tribe still. They're so incredible. They're beautiful, beautiful people. Um, but one day we were out doing ministry. This is my favorite ministry story, or one of them. We were out doing ministry and just walking along the beach in Zanzibar because it's an island and it's off the coast of Tanzania. So a lot of Maasai people will come to this island because it's a touristy island, and they'll um, try to work or do whatever. So we're walking, and there's all the Maasai guys on the beach selling their products and doing their thing. And I start talking to one of them, and once you start talking to one guy, you kind of draw a crowd. So me and another girl, we were just kind of sharing a little bit about Jesus and what we were doing and that kind of stuff. And by the time she was finished talking, there was a crowd of like 20 people who were surrounding us. And so we were like, okay, well, this is our chance. If we're going to preach the gospel, let's do it now. So I got to preach the gospel to a whole group of like 20 Maasai guys on the beach at sunset. It was like just the most aesthetically beautiful thing, but also the most like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is my life right now. We had like 13 people come to know Jesus, and it was just so cool to see the hunger of people in these places, and just the desire to, one, meet these people, these Westerners who are here doing who knows what, and then also to hear what we had to say. And so that's one of my other favorite stories to get to share whenever I talk about what my job is and what
Hmm.
ministry looks like in other places.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's so cool. Okay. And then do you have a favorite travel story? Because I'm totally open to those as well.
Yes, let me think. Travel. I don't know. I feel like I just have travel stories every time I travel, because things always go wrong. Um, like sometimes I'm like, wow. Honestly, I think my favorite travel story is probably not it's just like a travel story. Whenever I was in Europe and I got to travel around, and it like this probably really is my favorite, but it really was so awesome to get to stay with you guys. And I feel like it was just such a one to get to stay with an American family in Paris and hear what your life is like as an expat there, but then also just making connections all around the world and being
Hmm.
like, oh, when people would ask how Europe was, I'd be like, oh, I got to stay with these people in Paris, and she has a podcast, and they have this incredible family, and they're getting to share this life with their kids and have their kids grow up in these crazy places. And then getting to go from there to bounce all around Europe and see what life is like in Europe, because I'd never been to Europe, never been to like first world countries other than America. And so it was just super interesting to me to get to see what culture is like, because I feel like that's kind of people's story is different than mine. They usually go to Europe or these other first world countries, and that's where they travel. And so whenever they go to third world countries, it's a different experience.
Yeah.
But for me, it was the opposite because I had only been to third world countries. And so then getting to be in Europe and see what it was like there and how people lived there, that's still obviously different, very different than America, but um, completely different than these other places that I had been. I think that's been the most interesting thing I would have to say about traveling, which totally was not a travel story, but I just started
That's fine.
talking and
No,
just
it's
went
great.
on.
It's great. It's interesting the musings that come when you start kind of thinking about
I
just
know.
all the things. And so also I think it's noteworthy to mention that distinction that you made of like not all expats are going to, I mean, we all expect we're not going to have the same experience, but some
Mhm.
people like yourself are expatting, if that, I'm making a verb of something that's not really a verb, but they're expatting in third world countries, and so it's a
Mhm.
completely different experience.
It
and
is.
and I think that's really, that makes the culture and the community of expats very rich because we're all outside of our home country, living very different lives in these different countries. And when you get to have this confluence of people and you can share experiences, it's very, very enriching, if that makes any sense. So I would ask you then, my next question is, what has been your favorite thing about being an expat?
Yeah, my favorite thing is just all the new adventures
Mm-hmm.
because life is just so different in every country. And I've never been in one country for longer than 2 months. And so I think, but I've been to a lot of countries. And so I think it's so fun each each place to live. You live different. You live different lives everywhere. Like in Zambia, I'm camping out of a tent and I'm showering outside and I'm using a long drop, which is like a hole in the ground and
For a
to
toilet? Oh,
for a toilet. Yes.
wow.
I know. And then you go to the Middle East and it's pretty nice. Like I'm in a house, I have my own room, I have a bathroom with a nice shower and um I'm trying to think of other places. And then I mean Europe is just its own thing.
It's something.
It is, yes. And so I love that I just can always switch up and life is not going to look the same and I'm not going to use the same toilet my whole life. I'm going to use holes in the ground and I'm going to use nice toilets and toilets with bidets and all this stuff and it's just so fun. It keeps me on my toes.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's so great. And so you kind of shared one already, but if there is a treasured memory that's like not that's not too personal that you would like to share that has happened during your time as an expat, what is your most treasured memory that is not overly that you feel comfortable sharing?
Yeah. I think I will just always treasure the summer that I spent in the Middle East being a mom to this girl, Wendy, just because it was something that I never expected to experience so young.
Mm-hmm.
And then getting to be with her in the hospital and take care of her health wise and give her medicine and make sure that she's doing okay. I think really is something that I'll just treasure forever and just hanging out and sharing the same bedroom and all that stuff because she was like 2 when I was there.
Yeah.
And so just really taking care of another person I was really honored to do it and I'm just always going to treasure it because I just love her and always will be rooting for her and hoping praying that she gets fully healed from all the health stuff she has going on.
Yeah. That's very special.
Yeah.
And then my last question is, are there any last thoughts, words of wisdom, or words of encouragement that you'd like to share with us today?
Hmm. Um, I mean, obviously this is to a community of expats, so it's not like I'm talking to people who have never traveled the world before, but I think I would just my encouragement to everybody would just be to as you're abroad, which I would assume most people are taking advantage of it, but to just see as much as you can as you're in places where travel is much more affordable than say from the start in America. So
Mm-hmm.
to take advantage of the time off and the resources that you have to get everywhere and just see as many things as you can see because even though life in these different countries are so different than the lives we grew up with, there's still so many other cultures and lives that you can live in other countries. So see it all as you can and just experience as much as you can.
I love that. I think also it's funny because I will talk to certain people. I'm not going to name any names, but they'll say something. Oh, well, you spend your money on travel and and you and I'm like, not really. Like we have a very like modest budget because like you said when you're over here as far as at least in Europe, right? Or I'm also assuming like when you're over in some of maybe the Southeast Asian cultures
Yeah.
or countries,
Mhm.
excuse me, like you're already there. And so
Yeah.
then it's just traveling within. Like I mean we were looking up tickets to go to Barcelona. We did not end up purchasing these, but for 6 of us to go to Barcelona on a budget airline round trip nonstop, it was like 310 euro total.
Mhm.
Like and so
Yeah.
it's I like that you said like take advantage. You're there. Like take
Yeah.
advantage. Use I
Mhm.
mean, I'm not saying like go into mass amounts of debts. I'm
Right.
certainly
Of
not saying
course.
that, but like
Yeah.
within reason, like you're here. Go see it. Go see this like beautiful world. And
Yes.
And that, yeah. So basically, I really loved that little tidbit that you left for us. Thank you. And my final thing is, number one, to say thank you so much for being here. And also, could you please tell us how we can learn more about you and your mission work, and possibly even contribute if we feel led, like, to your cause online? Like, where can we find you?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Instagram. It's hello, it's Brookie. Pretty simple. Or you can go, and on my Instagram there's going to be a Linktree link, and it'll take you to a little video that I made just kind of explaining what I do a little bit more, and then the Overland website, and then my personal donation link. But I can also tell you my donation link, the URL, whatever, is overlandmissions.com/donate/Brooke Anderson.
Okay.
So pretty simple, pretty straightforward, and that'll also take you to the Overland Missions website, which will give you more of a rundown of what we do and what our day-to-day looks like and their mission.
Perfect. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Brooke, thank you so much. I really appreciate you getting up a little bit early and taking the time to do this interview with me. And we will just be praying that you get fully funded as soon as possible and can go out there and get in the field.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I hope that you have gotten as much out of this interview as I did. The fact that Brooke has been to so many countries at such a young age, and not just to vacation, but to work and to help, is amazing. Plus the fact that she can equally reference having a lovely room in a house in the Middle East with her own bathroom, and taking showers outside and using the toilet in a long drop, I believe it was called, in the same breath and with the same kindness in her heart towards both experiences is truly astounding. Brooke's zeal for life and for people is really contagious. And because this is a podcast format, you can't see her wonderful and genuine and heartfelt smile, but I will be sure to include the links that she shared plus her Instagram handle in the show notes, so you can go and see this truly lovely young lady in person, well, online, for yourself. And now for this episode's Shan Select. This week's pick is located on Canal Saint-Martin, or Canal Saint Martin, which in and of itself actually has a really cool history, and I'm told that you can take tours on the canal. It's in an up-and-coming area, but this restaurant feels well established. It's called Maria Belza, and the food there is absolutely divine. They serve food that is of Basque origin, but also other French classics. I chose to order from their formule, which looks like the word formula with an E at the end instead of an A. A formule in France is where you can choose from select dishes on a set menu. And whether you order only the main dish, the plat, or you choose either the entree, which in France is actually an appetizer, and a main dish, or a main dish and a dessert, that would be another price. Or you can choose all three for a little bit more. At Maria Belza, you can get the second option, which is what I did, for only €18.50, which is a great price. I ordered eggs mayonnaise, or mayonnaise, which is basically a very fancy version of deviled eggs for my American listeners, and it was excellent. And also beef bourguignon, which was so delicious and really hit the spot on that cold, windy, wintry day. The glass of wine that I had was also lovely with the meal, even though I didn't get a red. I know my husband, Chris, is listening to this and just shaking his head right now, I'm sure. But it was still wonderful. The company, one of my dear friends here in Paris, and her brother were also lovely. And the ambiance and the decor was beautiful. The servers were kind and attentive, and it was just an overall great experience. I will be sure to include their website in the show notes. And as always, I am not an affiliate, just a fan. And finally, for our quote of the day, I've decided to do a nice end cap and bring things full circle with this quote. You're going to be able to guess who it comes from right away, so I'll just say it. And Jesus spoke to them, saying, "All authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things that I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age." Amen. That comes from Matthew 28, verses 18 through 20 of the New King James Version of the Bible. I really like that quote because I think in life, and definitely when being an expat, there are times when you feel really down and sometimes really lonely. And I love that promise that Jesus, God, is always with us. It's nice to have a friend on this journey. Okay, if you're still here with me, I just want to say thank you. And if you know people that would like to hear more about the experiences of other expats, would you consider sharing the podcast with them? Or if you can't think of anyone in particular, maybe even take a moment and rate the podcast. And if you listen on Apple Podcasts, would you consider writing a review? That really helps other people to find the podcast. And honestly, I love hearing from you, and it's really encouraging to get that feedback. Thank you guys so much, and I look forward to meeting you back here again next week. Until then, this is Chandra Alley reminding you to live and travel in the know with Expatriotical.